The road runs straight for almost a kilometer. Flat, narrow on both sides, the ground drops away into bog-black water under thin grass, the kind of terrain that swallows anything heavier than a man on foot. A corridor. The only corridor. In a grove of birch trees 300 meters from the road's edge, a 46-ton machine sits hull down in a scraped-out position, its gun barrel threaded between two trees. The engine is off. The crew has been here since before dawn. 5 men inside a steel box in the August heat, breathing each other's air, watching through a narrow periscope slit. They have been ordered to hold fire until the enemy reaches a pair of birch trees the commander marked as his range reference 200 meters out, not a meter before. The commander's name is Senior Lieutenant Zinoviy Kolobanov. He is 30 years old. He has already fought one war, the Winter War against Finland, where he was wounded, decorated, and then court-martialed for what the Red Army called fraternizing with the enemy. His career should have been over. Instead, he is sitting in a KV-1 heavy tank on a swamp road outside Leningrad with an order that amounts to 4 words: block the road, die, on the road, the first vehicle appears. Then another. A column of tanks 22 in all moving in single file down the narrow strip of hard ground, their hatches open, their crews confident. They are the vanguard of the German 6th Panzer Division Army Group North spearhead, and for nearly 2 months they have crushed everything in their path. Krasnogvardeysk is 26 miles from Leningrad. They expect to be there by nightfall. Kolobanov's gunner, Senior Sergeant Andrei Usov, has the lead tank in his sights. He watches it roll past a ruined fence post, past a drainage ditch, past a dead birch stump. The pair of marked trees is 50 meters ahead of it now. 40, 30, nobody in the column knows they are about to drive into the most devastating single-tank ambush in the recorded history of armored warfare. To understand what happened on that road on August 20th, 1941, you have to understand the 2 months that preceded it and how completely the world had changed. On June 22, 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in human history. 3.5 million soldiers, 600,000 vehicles, 3,700 tanks. The assault struck across an 1,800-kilometer front in 3 massive columns: Army Group South toward Ukraine and the Caucasus oil fields, Army Group Center toward Moscow, and Army Group North toward Leningrad, the Soviet Union's second city, its cultural heart, the cradle of the Bolshevik Revolution. Hitler had made his priorities clear. Leningrad was not simply a military objective. It was an ideological one. He intended to encircle the city and starve it into oblivion, to erase it from the map entirely. In a directive issued that summer, he stated that the city would be leveled by bombing and artillery and that no surrender would be accepted. The population, nearly 3 million civilians, was to perish. Army Group North, under Field Marshal Wilhelm Ritter von Lieb, drove northeast through the Baltic states at a pace that stunned even the German High Command. Lithuania fell in days. Latvia and Estonia followed. By mid-July, German forces had crossed the old Soviet border and were pushing into Russian territory proper. The Panzer Divisions, the 1st, the 6th, and the 8th formed the armored fist of this advance, grouped under the 4th Panzer Group, commanded by General Erich Hoepner. The 6th Panzer Division had a particular distinction and a particular vulnerability. Its primary armored strength came not from the standard German Panzer III or Panzer IV, but from the Panzer 35, a Czech-designed light tank seized when Germany annexed Bohemia and Moravia in 1939. The Skoda factory had built them well enough for the campaigns in Poland and France, but by the summer of 1941, the 35 was already obsolete. It weighed just over 10 tonnes. Its frontal armor was 25 millimeters thick, roughly an inch. Its main gun was a 37 millimeter cannon, a weapon the German troops themselves had begun calling the Turklopfer the door knocker because of its inability to penetrate anything heavier than a light tank. The 6th Panzer Division's commander knew it. The division's own after-action reports from the summer of 1941 noted that the 35 was unsuitable for prolonged Eastern Front operations. Its pneumatic steering system seized in cold weather. Its armor offered no protection against Soviet anti-tank guns, and spare parts from the Skoda works had stopped arriving. This was supposed to be the 35's final campaign. The division would be re-equipped with proper German tanks after the war was won. The assumption, of course, was that the war would be won quickly. And for 2 months, that assumption held. The Red Army was in a catastrophic retreat. Entire armies were being encircled and destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of men marched into captivity in the Great Kessel-Schlachten, the Cauldron Battles. That defined Barbarossa's opening phase. Soviet tank losses were staggering. By mid-August, the Red Army had lost over 10,000 armored vehicles. Airfields were overrun before planes could take off. Communications collapsed. Command structures disintegrated. Stalin, by most accounts, was in a state of near paralysis for the first days of the invasion. In the path of Army Group North, the situation was particularly dire. The Luga Line, a hastily constructed defensive position along the Luga River, roughly 100 kilometers south of Leningrad, had held the Germans for several weeks in July and early August. But by mid-August, that line had been breached. The road to Leningrad was opening, and one of the critical junctions on that road was a small town called Krasnogvardeysk, known today as Gatchina, a rail and highway node just 42 kilometers from the city center. If the Germans took Krasnogvardeysk, they would control the southern approaches to Leningrad. The roads from Luga, from Kingisepp, from Volosovo all converged there. It was the lock on the door, and by August the 19th, the Germans were approaching it from 3 directions simultaneously. The Soviet forces available to defend Krasnogvardeysk were, by any conventional military assessment, inadequate for the task. Among the units scraped together for the defense was the 1st Tank Division, a formation that had already been savaged in weeks of fighting and was operating at a fraction of its paper strength. Within the 1st Tank Division, the 1st Tank Battalion still possessed a small number of KV-1 heavy tanks machines that were in August 1941. The most heavily armored fighting vehicles on any battlefield in the world. The KV-1, named for Kliment Voroshilov, the Soviet defense commissar, was a monster by the standards of 1941. It weighed 46 tons. Its hull armor was 75 millimeters thick at the front, with some variants carrying bolted-on applique plates that pushed protection to over 100 millimeters. Its turret-cast steel, rounded to deflect shot, was up to 95 millimeters thick. It mounted a 76.2 millimeter main gun, the F-32, that could destroy any German tank then in service at ranges well beyond a kilometer. And critically, the standard German anti-tank weapons of 1941, the 37 millimeter PaK-36 gun and the 37 millimeter tank gun mounted on the Panzer 35 and early Panzer IIIs, could not penetrate the KV-1's armor at any combat range. The German crews knew this. They had encountered KV-1s before, in the opening weeks of Barbarossa, and the reports that filtered back through the chain of command carried a tone closer to disbelief than tactical analysis. The Germans called it the Russischer Koloss, the Russian Colossus. On August 18, 1941, Senior Lieutenant Zinoviy Kolobanov was summoned to the headquarters of the 1st Tank Division, located in the basement of the cathedral at Krasnogvardeysk. The division commander, Major General Baranov, gave him his orders in person. Kolobanov was to take his company 5 KV-1 heavy tanks and block 3 roads leading into Krasnogvardeysk from the south and west. The road from Luga, the road from Kingisepp, and the road from Volosovo. The order, as Kolobanov later recalled it, was blunt: hold at all costs. The phrase "at all costs" in Red Army parlance in August 1941 meant one thing: you do not withdraw. You fight until you are dead or the enemy is stopped. Kolobanov was not a man inclined to grand gestures. He was a professional soldier born in December 1910 in the village of Arafino in what is now Nizhny Novgorod Oblast. He had entered the Red Army in 1933 and graduated with honors from the Oriel Armored School. He had fought in the Winter War against Finland, where he had been wounded 3 times and had 3 tanks shot out from under him. He had also been awarded the Order of the Red Star for bravery, and then, in one of those bureaucratic cruelties that defined the Stalinist military system, been court-martialed and stripped of rank for alleged fraternization with Finnish prisoners. He had clawed his way back. By August 1941, he was commanding a tank company again, and he had every reason to believe this would be his last battle. He spent the evening of August 19 studying the terrain around the 3 approach roads. He drove each route personally. He examined the ground on foot. And he chose his positions with the care of a man who understood that 5 tanks against 3 Panzer Divisions was not a battle, it was a calculation. His job was not to win. His job was to make the cost of passing as high as physically possible. He assigned 2 KV-1s to cover the Luga Road, 2 more to cover the Volosovo Road, the 5th his own, tank number 864, with Usov at the gun he positioned personally on the Kingisepp Road, near the settlements of Voiskovitsi and what is now Novi Uchkos. The position he selected was tactically superb. The road at that point ran along a narrow causeway flanked on both sides by deep, impassable swamp. Any armored column approaching along that road would be confined to the road itself, unable to deploy off it, unable to maneuver, unable to flank. It was a corridor, and Kolobanov placed his 46-ton tank in a scraped-out, hull-down position in a birch grove 300 meters from the road, with clear fields of fire along the entire length of the corridor. He ordered every tank in his company loaded with twice the standard ammunition complement and 2/3 of it armor-piercing. He ordered his crews to camouflage their positions with cut branches and netting. He briefed his other 4 tank commanders on a single, critical instruction: do not fire until I give the order. He did not want the Germans to know his strength. If each tank fired independently, the enemy might estimate the Soviet force accurately and call in air support or heavy artillery. If only one tank fired, the Germans might believe they faced a single vehicle or even a mine and attempt to deal with it on their own, on Kolobanov's terms. The crews settled into their positions before dawn on August 20. The morning was warm. Mosquitoes rose from the swamp in clouds. Inside the KV-1, the temperature climbed steadily. The 5-man crew, Kolobanov as commander, Usov as gunner, driver Nikolai Nikiforov, loader Nikolai Rodenkov, and radio operator Pavel Kiselkov sat in near darkness, watching the road through their vision slits. And they waited. They came mid-morning. The vanguard of the 6th Panzer Division's armored column, 22 tanks moving in road column, single file, spaced at regular intervals, exactly as doctrine prescribed for movement along a single road. The lead tanks were Panzer 35's 10-ton Czech light tanks with open hatches, their commanders standing in the turrets, scanning the terrain without urgency. They had been doing this for 2 months. They had rolled through Lithuania, through Latvia, through the Luga line. Nothing had stopped them for long. Usov tracked the lead tank through his gun sight. The round in the breech was armor-piercing. The range was closing steadily, 600 meters, 500, 400. Kolobanov had marked 2 birch trees as his fire reference, the point at which the geometry of the ambush was perfect, the angle flat, the range short enough that even a marginal hit would be lethal. The lead tank passed a ruined fence, a drainage marker, a line of scrub. It reached the birch trees. Usov fired. The first round struck the lead Panzer 35 and destroyed it instantly, the 76. 2mm armor-piercing shell punching through 25mm of Czech steel the way a rifle round goes through plywood. The tank lurched sideways and began to burn. The column behind it stopped. This was the moment. The 2 or 3 seconds in which an ambush either succeeds or fails, everything Kolobanov had calculated depended on what happened next. If the German column immediately reversed and withdrew, he would have destroyed 1 tank and lost his element of surprise. If they pushed forward off the road, they might escape. But the German crews did precisely what Kolobanov had anticipated. They assumed the lead tank had struck a mine. Road columns in 1941 hit mines regularly. It was not unusual. The column stopped and waited. Usov traversed his turret and fired again. The second round destroyed the second tank in the column. Now the Germans knew, or should have known, that this was not a mine. But Kolobanov had planned his next move. He ordered Usov to shift fire to the last tank in the column, the rearmost vehicle, 700 meters down the road. Usov laid the gun, fired. The shell struck clean. The last tank died where it stood, blocking the road behind it. 22 German tanks were now trapped on a narrow causeway. The lead vehicle was burning, blocking the road forward. The last vehicle was burning, blocking the road back. On both sides, swamp. Deep, soft, black swamp that would swallow anything with tracks narrower than the KV-1's wide treads. The 6th Panzer Division's vanguard was boxed. The German crews reacted as trained soldiers react. They traversed their turrets and began firing back. But they had 2 crippling problems. First, they could not identify the source of the fire. Kolobanov's KV-1 was hull down in a grove 300 meters away, camouflaged with branches, firing through a narrow gap between trees. The muzzle flash was partially obscured. The sound echoed off the tree line. The German tank commanders, many of them standing in open hatches moments before, were now frantically scanning a featureless wall of birch and bog, firing at shadows. Second, and this was the mathematics that made the entire engagement a slaughter, their guns could not hurt the KV-1. The Panzer 35 mounted a 37mm Skoda A3 cannon. At 300 meters, that gun could penetrate approximately 30mm of rolled steel armor. The KV-1's frontal armor was 75mm thick. The turret was up to 95mm. The shells hit, rang off the hull like hammer blows, and did nothing. They could not kill Kolobanov's tank. They could not even damage it. Every round that struck the KV-1 was a statement of impotence. Some crews, understanding this, tried to escape. They drove their tanks off the road and into the swamp and sank. The Panzer 35's narrow tracks, designed for Czech and French roads, had no purchase in Russian bog. Tanks that left the causeway bogged down within meters, their engines screaming, their tracks churning black mud, going nowhere. They became stationary targets. Usov worked through the column with methodical precision. He did not rush. He did not waste ammunition. He fired, observed the hit, confirmed the kill, traversed to the next target, and fired again. Kolobanov directed him from the commander's position, calling out targets, adjusting fire. Loader Rodenkopf fed armor-piercing rounds into the breach in a rhythm that never faltered. Driver Nikiforov held the tank steady. Kiselkov monitored the radio for any sign that the Germans had called for air support or artillery. Inside the KV-1, the conditions were hellish. Every time the gun fired, the breech recoiled violently inside the cramped turret, filling the fighting compartment with cordite fumes and searing heat. the spent shell casing's heavy brass cylinders piled up on the turret floor. The noise was beyond description. The concussion of their own gun, the continuous hammering of German shells striking the hull from multiple directions, the roar of burning vehicles on the road. The crew could feel the impacts. Each hit a physical jolt that rattled teeth and shook dust from every surface but the armor held. Round after round after round struck the KV-1, and not one penetrated. In 30 minutes, it was over. Usov had fired 98 armor-piercing rounds. 22 German tanks were destroyed, every vehicle in the column. 2 towed artillery pieces that had been trailing the armor were also knocked out. When Kolobanov finally ordered the engine started and pulled his tank out of its position, the road in front of him was a corridor of fire. 22 wrecks, some still burning, some with ammunition cooking off inside their hulls, lined the causeway from end to end. The swamp on both sides held the carcasses of tanks that had tried to flee and drowned in mud. And on the hull of KV-1 number 864, the crew would later count 135 direct hits from German tank and anti-tank fire. Some sources record the number as 156. Not one had penetrated. But Kolobanov's was not the only engagement that morning. On the Luga and Volosovo roads, the other 4 KV-1s of Kolobanov's company had taken up their own ambush positions. The same tactic, the same discipline, the same order: hold fire until the enemy was committed to the kill zone. When German armored elements approached along those roads, they too drove into prepared ambushes on ground that offered no escape. The 4 remaining KV-1s destroyed 21 more German armored vehicles between them. The details of these engagements are less well documented in the historical record. Soviet after-action reporting in August 1941 was frequently incomplete, and many records were lost in the chaos of the Leningrad defense, but the combined result is not in dispute. By the end of August the 20th, 5 Soviet KV-1 heavy tanks had destroyed 43 German armored vehicles. 5 tanks against 43. A kill ratio that has never been matched in a single armored ambush, before or since. The German 6th Panzer Division's advance on Krasnogvardeysk was halted for at least a full day. The division's war diary, housed in the German Federal Archives and referenced in the U.S. National Archives, records the loss on the 20th of August. The impact was not merely material, it was psychological. German panzer crews had spent 2 months in a war where Soviet resistance, though often brave, had been disorganized, poorly led, and ultimately futile. Barbarossa's momentum had created an expectation of continued advance, a belief, embedded deeply in the German officer corps by August 1941, that the Red Army was a broken instrument incapable of mounting coherent resistance. Kolobanov's ambush punctured that assumption. Not with a grand strategic counteroffensive, not with overwhelming numbers, with 5 tanks, 1 road, and a commander who understood the ground. The 6th Panzer Division's commander wrote in a report dated October 1941 that the Panzer 35 was finished, that the summer campaign had been its last, that the vehicle's armor offered no protection against Soviet weapons, that its gun was ineffective against Soviet heavy tanks. The division was subsequently withdrawn from the Eastern Front and re-equipped with German-manufactured Panzer IIIs and 4Fs. All 26 remaining operational Panzer 35s were sold to Romania. But none of that mattered to the men in the burning tanks on the Voshkovitsy Road. For them, the strategic picture was irrelevant. They had driven into a corridor from which there was no escape, and they had been killed by a weapon they could not see and could not fight. The ambush lasted 30 minutes. For the crews of 22 tanks, those 30 minutes were everything. When Kolobanov filed his after-action report, his chain of command did not believe it. The numbers were too large. 22 tanks destroyed by a single KV-1 in 30 minutes, the claim defied the experience of a military establishment that was, at that moment, losing tanks by the thousand. Kolobanov's report was verified only when reconnaissance teams inspected the road and counted the wrecks. Every number checked out. Kolobanov was nominated for the title Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest military decoration the state could bestow. It was an obvious recommendation. Usov's nomination went through. The gunner was awarded the Order of Lenin. But somewhere in the chain of command, someone took a pen and crossed out Kolobanov's nomination. In its place, written in red pencil, the color of bureaucratic correction were the words, "To the Order of the Red Banner." The Order of the Red Banner was a significant decoration. It was not trivial. But it was not the hero of the Soviet Union. And the downgrade was never explained. No official reason was recorded. No document survives that states why the man who had just achieved the most successful single-tank engagement in history was denied the recognition his own division had recommended. The most common explanation offered by historians is Kolobanov's prior court-martial during the Winter War, the fraternization charge that had stained his record. In the Soviet system, a man with a political mark against his name did not receive the state's highest honor, regardless of what he had done on the battlefield. The politics came first. They always came first. Kolobanov did not protest. He did not have the option of protesting. He returned to his unit and continued fighting. On September 15, 1941, less than a month after the ambush, he was near the town of Pushkin, south of Leningrad, when an explosion from a fuel tank and ammunition depot sent fragments into his position. He suffered severe wounds to the head and spine. He was evacuated from the front and spent the next 3.5 years in military hospitals. He returned to active duty in 1945, but arrived too late to see further combat before the German surrender. His post-war career was marked by further misfortune. Assigned to serve in the Soviet occupation zone in East Germany in 1951, he was court-martialed again when a subordinate deserted and fled to the British zone. The escape was not Kolobanov's doing, but the Soviet military system held commanders responsible for the actions of their men. He was demoted and transferred to the Belarusian military district. He served out his remaining years in the army, rising no higher than lieutenant colonel, and retired in 1958. He went to work as a manager at the Minsk automobile plant. He lived quietly. His achievement at Voshkovitsy was not widely commemorated during his lifetime. In 1980, the villagers of Novy Ukhoz, the settlement near where Kolobanov had dug in his tank, demanded that a memorial be erected on the site. The Soviet authorities agreed, but no KV-1 could be found for the monument. And his too-heavy tank, a later war successor, was installed instead. Kolobanov attended the dedication in 1986. He is said to have felt a measure of bitterness at seeing the wrong tank on his ground. Zinoviy Kolobanov died in Minsk on August 8, 1994. He was 83 years old. He had never received the Hero of the Soviet Union. The red pencil mark on his nomination was never reversed. In 2006, a monument was unveiled in his honor in Minsk, the capital of Belarus. In 2014, the video game World of Tanks introduced a decoration called Kolobanov's Medal, awarded to any player who destroys 5 or more opponents single-handedly to secure victory. It became one of the game's most coveted achievements, a small irony perhaps, that a virtual award now bears the name of a man whose real one was taken away. The road near Voshkovitsy still runs through the same terrain, the same flat causeway, the same bog on either side. The birch trees have grown back. The swamp has reclaimed the ground where 22 tanks burned. A visitor standing on that road today would see nothing to suggest that anything had ever happened there, except for the memorial and the wrong tank standing where the right one once sat. But the engagement itself endures in the military record, documented, verified, uncontested. On a single morning in August 1941, one Soviet tank crew destroyed 22 German tanks in 30 minutes without suffering a single penetrating hit. 5 Soviet tanks, Total, destroyed 43 German armored vehicles. It remains the most successful single-tank ambush ever recorded. The men in those German tanks, the drivers, the gunners, the loaders, the commanders, were soldiers doing what their army asked of them. They drove down a road they had been ordered to take, into a position from which they could not escape. Some of them burned. Some of them drowned in swamp mud trying to flee machines that had become traps. Their names, for the most part, are not recorded in the sources available. They are as absent from the record as Kolobanov was nearly absent from his own country's memory. War consumes its participants with equal indifference, regardless of which side they fought on. Andrei Usov, the gunner who fired 98 rounds and destroyed 22 tanks in half an hour, received the Order of Lenin. He survived the war. His subsequent life is sparsely documented. Nikolai Nikiforov, the driver who held the KV-1 steady while 135 shells struck its hull. Nikolai Rodenkov, the loader who fed armor-piercing rounds into the breach without pause in heat and noise and fumes that no training exercise could have prepared him for. Pavel Kiselkov, the radio operator who monitored the frequencies for the airstrike that never came. These men's names survive in the after-action report, what they did with the rest of their lives. The historical record does not comprehensively tell us. Kolobanov himself said very little about the engagement in his later years. He had done his duty. The army had not rewarded it as his commanders believed it should have been rewarded. He bore this with the stoicism of a man who had already been court-martialed once for reasons that had nothing to do with his competence and knew that the system he served did not operate on merit alone. The road at Voiskovitsy is quiet now. The birch trees sway, the bog breathes, and somewhere beneath the grass and the black water, the ground still holds the tracks of 22 tanks that went in and never came out. If this story stayed with you, if the names Kolobanov and Usov and Voiskovitsy mean something to you now that they didn't 30 minutes ago, then subscribe to this channel. We tell the stories that the textbooks leave out, the ones that deserve to be remembered, the ones that are too important to forget. Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share this with someone who cares about history, because stories like this one survive only when people pass them on.